Hello, thank you for joining me for this session on how to make ghee, and I'll incorporate some conversation about Ayurveda and Ayurvedic nutrition with some tools and tips for you to hopefully use. I'm Natalie. I'm very grateful that you're wanting to spend some time learning about this as a topic that I'm really passionate about. I'm a yoga teacher and an Ayurvedic practitioner, and I'm a mama bear. I live in the Dandenong Ranges, and I have gone through a fairly significant healing journey where I've had impaired digestion for maybe 10 to 15 years. And there's been a number of reasons for that. And I found my way eventually to Ayurveda with a long journey previous, troubleshooting the allopathic system, which honestly was useless when it came to gut health. I've worked with naturopaths, Chinese medicine, and also dietitians. And really, it wasn't until I found Ayurveda that things just fell into place. And so I want to share these information so that maybe it can help you or somebody that you know also on your healing journey. So I'm going to jump straight into the ghee cooking demonstration because that's going to take some time. And I'll talk about ghee nutrition and Ayurveda throughout the cooking of the ghee. So ghee is butter that has been cooked down, and it is a pure fat that in Ayurveda is really popular in cooking and also medicinal use. So it's really easy to digest. We have removed the milk proteins, so there's no lactose in it. It's just pure fat. And it's a healthy fat. And there's probably going to be debate that you can find in research associated with what is healthy fat and animal fats. But in Ayurveda, we consider it to be a staple to enable lubrication, hydration, and improving conditions like dryness, poor circulation. And it's an excellent tool to deliver medicinal benefits of food because it's so easily digested, and it can take with it the medicinal benefit of the food or the herbs that you take with it. So you'll see it really commonly in Ayurveda. And what you need is, I've got my stove down here. But you're going to need a few things to get started. And that is, first of all, some butter. This is just an example of butter. I'm not going to suggest this is the best option, but it's the best option I can afford. And this is just a no-name brand at the supermarket, organic, unsalted, grass-fed butter. And I don't know, I think it's actually from New Zealand. Yeah, it's from New Zealand. You could probably get better in terms of ethically sourced, higher quality butter, the better. But this is what I use every week. You need a heavy base saucepan, depending on the size and how much butter you're going to do. We're going to be using a jar. I forgot what that's called. A strainer and a jar. All right, and so on the stove, I'm going to get started. So I'll tilt this down, and this is an induction with a child block. Just getting that off. And I'm going to start that on a low heat. That's going to make some noise, so I'll move it out of our way soon. So just when you've got your saucepan heating up, or if it's already warm, place your butter into the saucepan. Ideally, your saucepan and the things that you're using here now are sterile. All right, so you wouldn't be sticking your finger in that. You wouldn't be putting spoons that haven't been thoroughly washed or sterilized. Because one of the benefits of ghee is that it will not spoil, but so long as it's sterile. All right, so hopefully you can see that on my stove. I'll just tilt that on. There's not a lot to see right now. So we'll work with this sort of situation. With the butter now melting and my stove on a low heat. We don't want to burn this. This needs to be a slow process. And I'm going to put a little intention now into the ghee as well. So we are, as I'm filming on a full moon. And full moon is a good time to make your ghee because there's a whole lot of extra potent energy that we're influenced by at the moment. And I'm going to put an intention of this ghee to be really nourishing and supporting of my greatest health and well-being. Sometimes I play a little mantra into the ghee, into the saucepan, or just have it in the kitchen, do a little dance while I'm cooking, just to create a little energy within the kitchen that's encouraging of health and vitality. It is thought that ghee can absorb energy, and we do too. So that's optional, but that is what I have done. And so I'd like to chat to you now while that's going and that's just started to melt. I'm going to turn that up higher so that it melts, and then I'll turn it down and keep chatting to you about the process, and I'll show you the process as it goes on. I will, while we're waiting, just now share my screen with you so that we can chat about what is Ayurveda. I hope for this to be a learning experience. So just sharing this screen with you. And Ayurveda is India's folk medicine. I love this quote from Dr. Frawley that I'll read to you. Ayurveda is a holistic medical system applying all aspects of health, including physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual aspects of the self. So in Ayurveda, we consider you to be quite complex and not just physical. So when you have physical problems that emerge in your body, we look not only at what is that manifestation of disease or illness, but what are the things going on for you emotionally, mentally, and spiritually that have attributed to that physical imbalance. And then likewise, mental health or other degrees or aspects of your health. We consider your whole being. For me, that was really new, although I worked with a naturopath when I was young, but it wasn't over a long period of time. But for me, this was new. I wasn't raised with this recognition that maybe my depression and anxiety that I experienced in my teens and 20s had something to do with my gut. And that maybe my skin eczema that I used to get quite bad as a teen and in my 20s was impacted likewise from my gut or the depression or the other emotional issues that I were going through. And that's the point, that you are holistic in your health and well-being. There is no part of you that's isolated. All parts of you are completely integrated. So for Ayurveda, we look at the whole of you and determine your wellness and indicators of health based on your whole being. So as I mentioned, it's a folk medicine from India. The word Ayur means life and Veda means knowledge. So it is the life knowledge. So it's your knowledge of life to increase your life force in your body. Yoga is used together with Ayurveda to create a spiritual empowerment. And Ayurveda is used to enable your spiritual empowerment to live a great and fulfilled life. So that is through a system of remedying any illness or signs of imbalance. It was around 5,000 years it was recorded, and it's said to be the oldest documented medical system, but of course there are other medical systems that are older, especially in Australia. that are just not as formally documented. I love this quote, likewise from Frawley. Ayurveda shows us how to live in harmony with our natural constitution to prevent disease and fulfill our soul purpose or potential, excuse me. So there's two things in there. This is about preventing disease, just sort of looking after the body so that you don't fall into ill health or disease. But then there's that beautiful reference to fulfilling our soul potential. So we don't consider you to just be a material body or physical being, but rather a spiritual being on that physical journey. And so we need to use both yoga and Ayurveda together in order to have the greatest fulfilling life that you were intended to have. And in regard to preventing disease, I just want to mention that Ayurveda in Australia, we definitely use it as a complementary practice to allopathic medicine in order to prevent disease. Sometimes when I see people, or even in myself, in my family, where disease has already been realized, so that is, you've gotten to a point or stage of illness where there is disease that has set in, Ayurveda could be used to wind back that stage of disease, but sometimes Ayurveda is used to extend your life or manage the disease, as in your quality of life associated with the disease. So there are degrees of disease, but ideally we want to use both yoga and Ayurveda together in order to be within balance and avoid disease. And so Ayurveda is all about creating balance, therefore. And there are a number of reasons why we would be out of balance. They would be, the seasons put stress on us, our age, different traumas we may go through, our lifestyle choices, habits, and diet, what we eat and how we eat. So before I go on, I might just show you now the ghee, which has melted, nearly all melted. Because it makes a noise, I'm just moving it back for us to see. All right, so you can see now that the ghee is simmering very gently, and it's not 100% melted just yet. I'm just going to give it a little move on this stove. You can see there that what has already started to happen is a foaming has occurred in the butter. So we're already commencing now that process of separating. You can see as I move it, the fats there, because I've moved it as it is induction. It's turned off. So just turn that back on. So it's still simmering away, and that foam is going to continue as it simmers as an indicator of that separation of the milk solids from the fat. And we're just going to keep that going until that returns again to a simmer. I'm just going to place that over out to the side. And I was chatting to you about what is yoga and Ayurveda. And the the foundational premise in both yoga and Ayurveda is that you are nature. And you are all of the elements that are embedded within nature, embodied within you. It is when we separate ourselves from nature that we create problems. And what we do in Ayurveda is provide a little framework to help understand our nature. And because we identify the 5 great elements as being the building blocks of the universe, as in all living things contain different frequencies of energy associated with these elements, then we need to understand what these elements are and how they play out in us. And so they are earth, most gross, most dense, most obvious. Water, all the liquid parts in us and all otherwise in nature. Fire, anything that's warm within us or bright and light. Air, those gases that are constantly moving. And space, most subtle of all the elements, and it's everything else. And your unique elemental composition, so that is the elemental energy within you, influences all aspects of your life. And so it determines how you eat, your hunger, your sleep, how you grow, repair, and rest, think, feel, and be, and create. And so in Ayurveda, we're really interested in this composition of elements. And what we do is that we categorize how the elements are influencing you into 3 categories. These are known as your state of balance, and that is dominated by those elements, and really predictable manifestations can occur when you have a particular state of balance. So the first one is Vata dosha, and that is dominated by the air and ether elements or space. And when you're influenced by these elements, i.e. Vata dosha, you can be really adaptive and creative, fun and enthusiastic. You think about it, you've got the air and ether elements. So you could have great ideas, you can have lots of projects on the go, but that can make you feel ungrounded. It can make you feel anxious and with fear because there's not that sense of stability in your life. In your body, that can result in constipation, dry skin, cold in nature, resulting in poor circulation, and food intolerances or sensitivities can come about. And you're triggered by Vata dosha in your later stages of life and in autumn. The second of the states of balance or dosha is Pitta, which is dominated by the energies of water and fire element. It's characterized with a heat. And when you're affected by this dosha, you can feel this great strength and motivation. You have a reasonable appetite and you're usually absorbing pretty well those nutrients. But when you're out of balance, then your digestion moves too fast and you don't absorb those nutrients. That can lead to malnourishment, so iron deficiencies or other related deficiencies, for example. You can be a little stressed because you've got quite a lot on. You set the bar pretty high for yourself and you have the strength and stamina to do it, but this can make you stressed. And also emotionally, it can result in a little anger, perhaps, or quick to anger. Heartburn can come about because they have that quick nature in your digestion. So the acids are not balanced in your stomach. You can tend for inflammation in digestion, or otherwise it could be inflammatory skin disorders or inflammation in the joints, perhaps. Red skin and infections. And the other one is Kapha dosha, and that is associated with the earth and water elements. And as a result, there's quite a heavy feeling that can come about, which can make you feel quite calm, loving and nurturing, grounded, and just a solid being. Either you know it, if that's you, you know it. It's quite hard to move when you're that heavy, and this plays out, therefore it's quite hard to change. You become quite stagnant in your habits and you're reluctant to make change. You might like and have a strong appetite and so indulge in foods and maybe that's sugary foods that can result in a larger body frame. You can become quite attached to things and again find it hard to shift. And you can build physically, you can have blockages in your system that can result in a buildup of mucus in your sinus, for example. And there can be other blockages in the body as a result from an imbalance of kapha dosha. So you can see we are all of the elements, but what we find at different times in our life is that we can be triggered by one or more of these elements dominating. That can have an impact on our body, mind, emotions, and then our access to spirit as a result. So I mentioned Vata was triggered in the stage of life, later in life and in autumn, Pitta in summer and in your mid years of life, Kapha in your early stages of life and in winter and spring. All right, so let's have another look at our ghee. Excuse me. So I'm just moving the ghee in now, and I'm just going to highlight to this point, I'm sort of halfway through the ghee cooking process. So I'm just going to hold that up again so that you can see that properly. And we're still foaming, but you can see here the foaming is now, it's actually becoming solids. So that's what's going to happen, and I'm just going to move it again so you can see we're still working here with the separation process, and we need to continue this probably for another 10 or so minutes. So that's been 10 minutes already. So it's a 20-minute cook of your ghee. Okay, I'm really happy with the way that's going, but it's a little fast now. So this is a bit strange because it's an induction. Normally I use a gas hob, but I'm really happy with that, how that's going. And that has now begun bubbling. So we've gone from just frothy to a combination of frothy and bubbling. And that's going to be significant as I take you through to that next process where the foaming will cease. And when the foaming ceases, then I know that it's ready to turn off. So one of the things is happening here is that separation of the proteins and the heaviness of them sinks the proteins down to the bottom. And so that's the reason I'm moving it around, is so that it doesn't get stuck to the bottom. You could use a spoon. I do not, as I mentioned before, because I don't sterilize the spoons, and I'm preferring this to be a sterile cook. So anything that you put in there could have any bacteria. And again, if you're wanting to keep it over an extended period of time, it will not spoil if there's no pathogen in it. I don't keep it for an extended period of time. I eat it too quickly. Okay, so just want to jump back in so that we can now talk about Ayurvedic nutrition. And all right, so we've done the doshas, we've done the elements, I've explained what Ayurveda is. And the Ayurvedic remedies need to be holistic, obviously, because your whole being needs to be considered. So the natural remedies relate to creating healthy habits, usually in the morning and the evening, and then seasonal habits. Looking at diet, but not just what you're eating, how you're eating. Exercise, yoga is a main part of my exercise practice, but otherwise exercise, movement, however that works for you. Stress relief, herbal medicine, detox, both daily and seasonally, and also body work. So that's in Australia. If you were in India, then it would also include surgery and psychology and other specialist services. All right, so just while that ghee's now cooking low, I'm going to talk to you about Ayurvedic nutrition. And the underlying premise with Ayurvedic nutrition is that we are aiming to improve digestion. And digestion is governed by the fire element in Ayurveda because of the heating and transformational qualities associated with digestion. So when your digestion is balanced, you are properly nourished and you can thrive in your greatest capacity. And that includes avoiding disease, reversing healing from illness, strength and stamina, mood and cognition, hormonal balance, fertility, and your immunity. When your digestion is weak, or if it's too fierce, so if it's unbalanced, there's little nourishment of your tissues and there's likely an accumulation of toxins. And this is the contributor to disease. So a low immunity will result, more infections, hormonal imbalance, skin disorders, digestive discomfort, which will go into more detail, and malnutrition. So not getting the nutrients that you need. And these signs of imbalanced digestion could be food sensitivities, gas and bloating, constipation, nausea, acid reflux, loose stools, heaviness, and feeling tired or foggy after meals. Excuse me. All right, so that is the Ayurvedic approaches to strengthen digestion. Sorry, I just had to stop the screen for a sec. Let me go back. I started to wonder if I was recording, but I am, and it's all good. So, okay, so there is a common saying that you would have heard, and that is, you are what you eat. But in Ayurveda, we say, not what you eat, you are what you digest. Because if you're not digesting what you're eating, then you can't be what that is. So you cannot be that. You need a strengthened digestion to enable you to absorb the nutrients within your foods. And so that really is that really fundamental piece in Ayurveda. And that's going to make sense when I start talking to you about some of the tips I'm going to give you in a minute. But the factors that influence weak digestion are food, definitely the choices that you make, in the foods and drinks that you have, and the preparations of the foods and drinks. I'll talk to these, don't forget, really specifically. When you eat has an impact, and how you eat has an impact. Your lifestyle, the things you do in the morning and the evening to frame your day, that movement and exercise, your vocation, the work that you do, and how satisfied you are in your work, your creativity, your capacity to get to and have fun and joy, and your connection with community. Stress has a massive impact on your digestion. I'm not gonna lie, this has the biggest impact for me on my digestion. So your pressure in life, the emotions, trauma, the seasons, whether that's the sun seasons or the moon seasons or whatever season it is that you're working within personally, this has a constant flux and change, and that puts pressure and stress on your system. And the gunas, which are 3 energetic forces, which I'll need to speak to you about, I think, on another day. But your stage of life and your genetics do play a role also in influencing your digestion. But we might talk about that another day. Genetics doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to follow that pathway of your genetic disposition if you can get your diet and lifestyle right. So for me, biggest issue I've had is sensitivity to different foods. I've had gas, bloating, constipation, and food intolerances for the last 10 years. And for example, I had to cut out gluten and FODMAPs and legumes and different proteins and dairies and So when you're in balance though, according to Ayurveda, you actually should be able to digest all of the foods, but in moderation. Yeah, so our goal in Ayurveda is to build the strength in your digestion. So if you have a little bit of gluten on occasion, or foods high in histamine, or proteins that are hard to digest, such as legumes, dairy, and meats, and then the FODMAPs, don't get me started on the sugars. So if your strength in digestion is there and your balance, you should be able to digest these foods on occasions And maybe it's that you need to take care still if you've damaged your gut lining, for example. But my goal, if you were to work with me, would be to increase your digestion to the point where you can eat those foods. We need to look at the ghee because she's just about ready to be turned off. So just bringing that back over again, and I'll give it a little stir around so you can see now. It's hard to see. Maybe I should use a spoon. I'll just use this and hold it up. Quite hard to hold and stir. Bear with me. Okay. All right. So I can feel, and maybe you can see that the milk proteins are now on the bottom. And if I leave it on, they're going to burn, and that's going to ruin our ghee. So the job is done where we have a tiny bit of foam left, but the heaviness of those proteins are now down the bottom. So this has to come off now. So turning it off. And the fan stayed on that machine because it's cooling down. And I'm just going to switch now and take this machine off. Thank you, Merrin, for lending me your awesome machine. Induction machine. Okay, so what I would normally do is I would turn off the stove that goes cold straight away because it's gas, as I mentioned earlier, and then leave it on the stove. But because I'm interested in this cooling down a little faster, I'm going to put it in this jug. That's the word, isn't it? And then you're actually going to be able to see as well. So what you can see there is that those milk solids, they did actually start going brown. So I may have left that on maybe a minute longer than ideal. It doesn't matter. This is going to be absolutely fine. So you can see that one butter is now 250 mils of liquid. And what's going to happen here, and hopefully you'll be able to see, is this will clarify. So this will get clear as those heavy proteins drop down again. And it's because I poured it, and before it was separated, and it's just combined a little bit now so that those in time as it settles, those heavy ones will drop to the bottom, and this will cool down for our next stage. And I will show you that in a moment. All right, so we're probably going to leave that for 5 minutes, which means I've just got 5 minutes to tell you about a little bit more about Ayurvedic nutrition and get into some practicals for you. So I was telling you about food sensitivity, and I'm making this as a confession, I guess, because I tried all of the restrictive diets, and the thing that they did was helpful for a short amount of time, but never for a long period of time. And it wasn't until I found Ayurveda, which was less about looking at the components of the foods that I was eating and more about creating a balanced diet and approach to food. So healing my relationship with food again and focusing in addition to ways that I could eat that encourage stronger digestion. All right, so and obviously all the other things, diet, daily habits, stress management, seasonal detox, and exercise, the whole thing. So we're not looking just at the food in Ayurveda. And that's really the difference in my experience, because again, all parts of you are integrated. What I would notice is like I would remove some food from my diet and I'd be like on this strict elimination diet, and technically I shouldn't have been having any issues in my gut. But then, you know, COVID came about, for example, or stressful situations came about and my gut issues would go through the roof. So there are a lot of times when I was doing the right things with the food I was eating, but there are always other factors at play. So it's a holistic program, but I want to get specific, and I'm going to probably move a little faster now, so I'm valuing your time. These are my general tips for building the strength in digestion in the way that you eat. And so, first one is eat your main meal at lunch. The reason for that is that your digestion will be strongest at lunchtime. So there's no point having a big hearty meal at dinner time because you will not be able to digest it well enough. And as a result, you will weaken your digestion and you'll divert your energy to digestion at nighttime when you don't need it, and take away from the energy that's needed for deep rest and repair in your body overnight. A really key function of sleeping. So eat your main meal at lunch, and that means those foods that are harder to digest, like proteins, for example. Cook all of your foods. So all well and good to eat, all well and good to consider raw food full of nutrition. Like it is, it's got more nutrition in it, but you can't digest it. So it's not going to be good for your digestion. It's going to weaken your digestion. When you cook it, think again about digestion being governed by the fire element. And if you can cook your food, then you're assisting the digestive fire by breaking the food down a little before it comes into your precious digestion. So that might change the way you eat those Buddha bowls, for example, or your salads. And you probably think the salad's healthy. But I'm sorry to say that even though the food is highly nutritious and clean, actually, it's so much harder to digest. So cook all your food. Include each of the 6 tastes in every meal, and that will enable, again, proper digestion, because in Ayurveda we consider each of the 6 tastes to correlate with a function of digestion, and that might be a release of enzymes or hormones associated with the digestive process along the digestive tract. And that starts from where you see it, smell it, and taste it. And the taste is very important. The 6 tastes I'm just going to show you are sweet, sour, pungent, astringent, bitter, and salty. So I've got some examples of these foods: sweet, sour, salty, pungent, bitter, and astringent. And I'll pop that in a PDF so that you can refer to it if you don't know them, so that you can plan for each of the 6 tastes to be included in your meals. This is also helping you feel satiated. Do you ever finish a meal and then want something else because you're not quite satiated? It's because your body actually is looking to experience each of the 6, and if it doesn't, then it seeks it somewhere else, and that comes up in cravings, for example, like chocolate or sweets or something otherwise. Create space between your meals, and that is no snacking. And finish your last meal 4 hours, maybe 3, 4 would be better, before you go to bed. So 6 o'clock would be a good time to have your last meal and not anything else before bed. And that gives you a solid fast. For example, if you were to eat your last meal at 6 p.m. and then not eat till 7 or 8, that's maybe 14 hours of fasting. And that's consistent with the modern research on intermittent fasting. And I highly encourage you to look into this if you haven't already, because there's heaps of information about intermittent fasting and the benefits on your gut in doing so. And it's consistent with this traditional advice in Ayurveda. So give your body a decent rest to repair, rejuvenate, and then prepare for the next meal, and avoid snacking. Avoid eating with distraction because you won't taste the food properly. You may absorb the stress associated with whatever that distraction is, and you won't know if you're full or not. And that takes us to the next tip, which is avoid overeating. And there's a little tactic that we use in Ayurveda, which is to stop eating just before you're full. And your body will actually give you the indicator in that. And so I'd like you to tune in and see if eat slow, taste it properly, avoid distraction, and when you burp, the first burp, it's not like a belch, it's like a little burp. It's your stomach's indicator that you are not quite full and it's time to stop eating. So, not eating to your overfull and not eating to your full, but eating just before you're full. It gives your belly enough room to churn and break down. And if you overload your stomach and the other digestive organs, basically you're putting out your digestive fire, similarly to the way it would if you were to load a fire with heavy logs before the flames really got burning. The last one, talking about digestive fire. Avoid drinking water during your meals. Don't want to be putting that fire out, and you don't want to be diluting the digestion or the food with the extra water. And that takes me to how you drink water. Maybe do it during the in between stages of the meals. So you're not snacking, remember. Wake up in the morning, have some warm water, have some more water an hour after breakfast, have another glass of water an hour after lunch, and then another one after dinner. So it just takes a little bit of management. Now, these might seem simple, but that's the point, is things have just got so complex, so complicated in our society. We have so much access to information and stimulation, and everybody's got a point of view on everything. Ayurveda takes you back to nature. It guides you back to those more gentle and harmonious approach to your holistic lifestyle and diet, and leads you back to your true knowing, calm and gentle state of being. So I hope that was helpful. There are some tools I can give you to track your habits, those 7 habits, to also track the 6 tastes. There's also some activities I've offered you for mindful eating to enable you to be without distraction, for example, and offer reverence to the process of eating. So I hope that they're helpful. And I'm now going to show you the ghee, which is entering its next stage of production. So back down here, where I've now got the strainer. So you remember I used that before to stir. So this is just a tea strainer, and that would be fine for, a small amount of ghee, but sometimes I use a big bowl, and so I use a different strainer. And with a bigger strainer, it's not as fine mesh as the tea strainer. So what I find is that I need to also pop a muslin cloth also to strain these milk proteins that have been left behind. So quite simply, I am now straining my ghee. I think some people take the foam off. I don't. It gets eaten too quickly in our house. But you could take the foam off, and that would be a scooping of it, or the process of cooking could have been slower. I had to stop it because it would burn, those proteins would have burnt. All right, so you can see that is the dark coloured milk proteins that have separated from the pure fat that has been left. And now is the golden goodness of ghee. So, oh, I should have bought you one to compare, but now that'll just sit. Pop the lid on straight away. It will continue to absorb any energy. So pop the lid on, leave it on the bench. It doesn't need to go in the fridge. It can stay on the shelf and yeah, enjoy that. Check out my website or other stuff that I have for recipes with ghee. And if you're wanting to reach out, please feel free, ask any questions. I love to hear from people with questions or problems. And I'll just put my details up here. So there are my details if you feel like reaching out. And if you're wanting to work with me to get more dosha specific or unique suggestions for your diet or lifestyle or self care, please let me know. Thanks for joining me.